I'm Mindy Peterson, and this is Enhance Life with Music, where we explore the ways music makes our lives better and spotlight the resources you can use to enhance your life with music. Joining me today from the San Francisco Bay Area is Aubrey Bergauer, who has been called the Steve Jobs of classical music and the Sheryl Sandberg of the symphony. Aubrey helps organizations optimize the business side of the arts, including growing audiences and donor bases, building relevance and visibility, using technology to elevate and extend the brand, and ultimately generating the revenue needed to sustainably fund the art that's produced. As chief executive of the California Symphony, Aubrey propelled the organization to double the size of its audience and nearly quadrupled the donor base. Her work and leadership has been covered in media, including the Wall Street Journal, Entrepreneur, and Symphony magazines, and she's an in-demand speaker at universities and conferences in the U.S. and abroad. Aubrey's first book, released in February of this year, it is called Run It Like a Business: Strategies for Arts Organizations to Increase Audiences, Remain Relevant, and Multiply Money Without Losing the Art. Welcome to Enhance Life with Music, Aubrey.
Hi, Mindy. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited about our conversation today, and I'm so thrilled with your book and the work that you're doing. My background is in music and business, so you are speaking my language in this book. I know you have a lot of experience with classical music organizations. So in your book, a lot of the examples and statistics are associated with that artistic discipline. But this book is not just for classical music performers and venues. Tell us more about who this book is for, what organizations you had in mind when you wrote it.
Sure. I think you nailed it, first of all, that it really is meant for organizations beyond classical music. And the reason for that is I started seeing in my work that so many of the challenges are really similar, no matter what corner of culture you're in, and culture in a pretty broad use of that term. And so to be more specific, so many of us are, whether you are a solo teacher or working at a performing arts center or working in administration at some other cultural institution, like no matter your role, even an artist performing, the challenges of growing the audience base, increasing donor support, trying to really generate the revenue necessary to fund the art we produce, those challenges permeate the sector, again, no matter kind of what corner of culture you're in. And so is it all identical? No, but are there these real through lines? Yeah, that's what I started seeing. And then when I really started digging into the data and research, the data bears that out, that, yeah, there are so many trends that are similar among the different disciplines. So the book is written for all of that, no matter where you are in arts and culture, no matter your role. And the idea is that there are businesses outside the arts, namely for-profit businesses, that actually have dealt with a version of these challenges before. And so every chapter is a different strategy of how do we borrow what's already been vetted and tested and apply it to our work in the arts.
Yeah. So all kinds of arts disciplines, whether it's dance, theater, classical music, jazz, and on and on. I mean, there's, visual arts. So all of those, anyone in that field can really benefit from your book, but also things like museums, zoos, libraries, aquariums. I mean, there's science centers, botanical gardens, you name so many. Your book even says even sports teams, which I found kind of interesting. Do you have a lot of sports teams that you work with?
A lot? No, I wish, but no, but because it's just fun. It's fun for me when somebody else comes out of the woodwork and is like, I see what you're doing and I see how that applies to me. And, so it's funny because I said not a lot of sports teams, but there are like this growing number that are like, yeah, we sell tickets. Yeah, we need to grow our audience base. Sure. Everything you're saying really applies to us. And when I get these calls or emails, I'm like, okay, yeah, I see it too. So I just really love when people make those connections on their own. But yeah, so sometimes that means sports.
Yes. Well, and I want to add to that a couple. One is university arts departments, because I am just continually blown away by the lack of business training that our artists receive. And it's so crucial because most of these artists end up running their own business, essentially. I started out in music and eventually ended up in a business and marketing track with college, but I ended up teaching piano lessons for decades up until recently, really. And all of that business training was so helpful for me in running my own studio and running my business. So definitely want to include those departments in this conversation. So much just crucial information in your book that will directly apply to them. But I also want to mention music businesses. These are for-profit businesses, but I've realized a lot of them are run by musicians who have backgrounds in performance or education and not business. They don't have that accounting or entrepreneurship or fundraising type of a background. And so this information is really, really critical for them as well.
Yeah. Oh, I so appreciate you saying all of this. Like I said, I love it when people make these connections, and that's what you're doing. You're like, this also applies here. It also applies there. And then I hear you say it, and I'm like, yeah, I do see those parallels. Good job.
Oh, for
like,
sure.
Yeah. And as you said, I mean, you have forged your own path with a background in business and as an artist. And I think that in particular just is so common, like in that we're trained as an artist, and then we have to figure out this whole other way to basically apply that art and manage the business around it. And that really, I think, is a summary of the book. How do we manage the business around the art?
Sure. And even if you, as a performer, you end up successful enough to hire an agent or a manager, if you have some of this background training, you're much less likely to be taken advantage of by someone who's not ethical in that role. And we just hear way too many stories of people being taken advantage of by unethical managers and publicists, who are skimming money and stealing from the people that they're managing. So I just feel it's really critical information to have, and you can't go wrong with getting this information. I think that anyone who is listening, who is intimately involved in any of these organizations, their ears perked up immediately when they heard the title of your book and when they heard what you do in your vocation. But for listeners who aren't intimately involved in these sectors, can you just set the stage for us? Pun intended there. Why? Give us the context of why this book is needed.
Yeah,
I do hear that jackhammer in the background.
Oh, dang, I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it. But just for listeners, Aubrey warned me when we started. She's like, I just found out last minute there's some work that's going to be done. We may hear a jackhammer. So excuse us for that. If any
welcome
to
the construction zone, everybody. This is real. All right. So, speaking of challenges.
So set the stage for us. Give us some context of why this book is needed and how the pandemic played into that too.
So the idea is that the challenges facing arts and culture, challenges such as declining audiences, subscription model, really declining, really, some even say the subscription model is dead, being beholden to more and more major donors, having to raise more money from fewer people. All of those challenges were in place long before COVID, and COVID just really accelerated that. And so many people have said, so many experts have said COVID for any industry, any sector, any trend was an accelerant. And that is true for us as well. And so the idea of these challenges were already in place, accelerated and exacerbated by COVID. Now what do we do? Because they're not just going to reverse themselves. That has been made clear now over decades and is even more urgent now, as just for so many organizations, we're just at a real, I hate to be dramatic about it, but kind of crisis point. And so to set the stage, as you said, that was the broader cultural context that I was looking at. And then my whole career has been almost 20 years now in arts management. I've always wanted to work in offstage roles and have a degree in music performance as well as business. And that's been the whole track. And no matter which organization I served, whether it was major institutions or when I was executive director of a regional orchestra, no matter the size of the budget, a version of those challenges existed. And the strategies I write about, every time I implemented a version of those strategies, we saw results. And then fast forward to the last 5 years, I've been working in a consultant role, helping other organizations implement these same strategies. And now I've seen it scale, like more and more organizations, whenever you adopt, again, some version of these strategies, everybody doesn't have to do it all, but I just seen it again and again and again. So you put all that together, severe challenges. I've seen solutions. The data and how this has worked in other fields is just, fuel for the fire on all of that. So you put it all together. And I thought the time is now for this book. I just really hope it brings value and hope and solutions to people who are looking for them.
Yeah. And I just want to point out some things that you highlight in your book. And one of those is that one of the challenges we all face is it does get more expensive every year to produce our art. It's a very labor intensive type of an industry, and there just aren't a lot of ways to save on costs. You point out in your book, you can't play Mozart faster, and somehow trim costs. And this human heavy industry, the labor wants raises every year, just like every other working human does. And you have not only the artists who are performing, who are humans wanting raises, but you have all the people supporting them, whether it's fundraising, marketing, production, education. And on top of that, there's usually not much fat to trim. Like I said, I work a lot with music educators, and in universities, it's kind of like, we're to the point where we're trying to cut costs and there's nowhere left to cut, So working smarter rather than harder is what we're really looking for, which is exactly what your book presents. I also love in your book, you are very clear multiple times about saying the art is not the problem. And as cultural institutions, we make incredible art and people want that art. They're drawn to it. We really have an incredible competitive advantage that a lot of brands work a lifetime to achieve, where we do have this incredible product. In fact, I love the quote you say in your book, our artists are so remarkable and their training so rigorous that it's harder to win an audition at a major professional orchestra than it is to get drafted into the NBA. And I was like, oh my goodness, that is an incredible perspective to put on this, and so true. So
yeah, it is so true. And I just want to underscore that and just say, I think this is a real, I don't want to say misnomer, but something that we get confused about. So many organizations, we attempt to make the solution, let's tinker with the product. Let's do a different concert. Let's do a different play, a different opera, whatever, fill in the blank discipline. But the reality is, no, our product is what we've been working for hundreds of years, literally, to almost perfect. I mean, that's what we're trained to do as artists. And so I just really underscore and appreciate that you're calling that out right now, that, the art is so good. The training is so rigorous. That stat is true. We ran the numbers, and it is statistically harder to win a job at a major symphony orchestra than get drafted in the NBA. And that just speaks so much to the talent we have. And so that is such good news for us as an industry. That's when I say, I hope there's hope. For me, this is hope. It's not a fundamental product issue. A lot of companies have a fundamental product issue. Let's talk about Boeing, right? To draw these parallels to the business world. And that's not what we're grappling with. So this is just really like a foundational asset we have.
Sure. And your book does have so much objective information, hard data, statistics, and results. So I love that. So much about the arts and music is subjective, which is beautiful in its own way. But one thing that sort of drew me to business and marketing was you also have some of this objectivity and some concrete principles and things that you can stand on. And I love that your book includes a lot of that data and research and case studies and success stories. One of my favorite places to turn for instant gratification and a dopamine hit is browsing digital sheet music at sheetmusicdirect.com. This online store is powered by music publisher Hal Leonard, and it has over 1 million arrangements that you can view, listen to, and download. No need to buy an entire book for that one song you love. Create your own library from selections representing all levels, instruments, genres, and holidays. Prices start at 99 cents, and you can both print your purchases and access them on any device, which is really handy for those of us who travel or are trying to go paperless. I would say this is my guilty pleasure, but it's actually a guilt-free pleasure. There are so many brain benefits to reading music, making music, and experiencing new music. Instead of subscribing to another streaming platform, subscribe to Sheet Music Direct to treat yourself and your kids to real brain food and a guilt-free pleasure. Access the latest hits and yesterday's classics at sheetmusicdirect.com. This is a quick break to tell you about Sonix, the service that I use to transcribe these episodes. Sonix is an artificial intelligence transcription service that automatically converts audio and video files to text, and it can translate to over 40 languages. I transcribe these episodes to make them more accessible. I tried multiple services and chose to stick with Sonix because of their accuracy, affordability, and because their site is just so easy to use. That's a big plus for me to not need to spend a bunch of time figuring out one more platform. While I love podcasts, I do tend to be a very visual learner. I figure other people probably are too, and having that written form of your work just makes it more versatile. Sonix transcripts make the most of your hard work and can increase traffic to your site. Sonix is spelled Sonix. You can check them out with a free trial plus an extra 100 minutes of free transcription by using the link sonix.ai/invite/enhancelife100. There's a link in the show notes. Again, it's spelled Sonix, and that link is sonix.ai/invite/enhancelife100 for a free trial and an extra 100 minutes of free transcription. So basically, we have a fabulous product. We just need to change our approach in ways, and there's so many strategies from the non-art sector that can be applied to arts organizations. So tell us about some of the strategies and topics that are covered in the 10 chapters in your book.
Sure. Let's talk about maybe subscriptions first, because I think that is, for me, the one that we can, like, it's in some ways low-hanging fruit. People ask me all the time, Aubrey, what's the low-hanging fruit? There's not a lot, but this might be like the one. So, okay, subscriptions.
And it's one everybody gets.
Exactly.
Because everybody's familiar with this model.
100%. So for everybody listening, the subscription economy, some people call it the membership economy, is booming. So it's Amazon, it's Netflix, it's all the things we get delivered to our door. It's all the services we subscribe to online. I mean, just so much in our world right now is based on this membership economy. And yet, I already said earlier in the conversation, some people even say in the arts, the subscription model is dead. And I thought, these two things do not compute. How is it booming, rising? It's literally 20% of all credit card transactions globally are towards subscriptions. And I'm like, how can this be true?
Exactly. That get billed automatically.
Exactly. And so I thought, there's some disconnect, and I'm going to figure out what it is. So started going really deep dive into the research, talked to experts, really started reading up on this. And it turns out there are some things that we do very differently than these other thriving subscription brands. So just to quickly name a couple of them. For example, Netflix does not ask me if I want to renew my subscription every month, right? No way. Netflix just charges my card, and I have to opt out if I want to leave that subscription. What do we do in the arts? This is true for donations too, not just our season ticket sales. We opt out everybody for them and ask them, would you like to renew? And again, same thing for donations. Would you like to give again? And just that one thing is so costly for us. We are losing so many subscribers and donors, so much recurring revenue because we just have this we ask people to opt in instead of ask them to opt out.
Yeah.
And I explain a whole bunch of ways of how do we make the shift, because it's not something you just rip the Band-Aid off and do. So there are ways to navigate it, of course, but I just offer that as an example. And then just to give one more, I would say, let's talk about onboarding. Like, what happens when somebody makes a donation at an organization? Usually like a tax letter in the mail that's kind of sterile comes. That's not a great onboarding experience. And turns out the research shows, like, the better the onboarding experience, the more likely somebody is to stay. And so that just really set me down a path of thinking, oh yeah, there is so much we could do. A welcome series, just to be even like basic about it. But a lot of organizations don't have a welcome, like, email series. And so when I say low hanging fruit, that's what I mean. I think there are ways that we can learn from these other subscription businesses and what's working and think, oh yeah, we could have an onboarding plan for our season ticket holders, for our donors. We could do that. And that alone is going to save me money on the back end later when I'm not having to mail them 30 versions of the subscription brochure and 5,000 emails to try to get them to renew. Like we're investing that
Right.
money up front. And that just like feels like a better solution. And it turns out for most businesses, it is.
Well, and you point out in your book too how important it is just to thank donors. And that's something simple. And yet you give a lot of really practical ideas for different ways to do that. And sort of going along with that too, you talk about let's dial back how many donor benefits, quote, air quote, we're giving away and really focus on what donors are wanting, what their cause is. So as a parallel to the healthcare industry, when people give to healthcare, it's because they want to cure cancer, not because they want to be invited to another wine reception. And the same is true for the arts. People do want to be thanked, but they have a cause that's important to them that they believe in too. And they don't necessarily need to get a bunch of freebies that are going to cost these arts organizations. They just want to be acknowledged and recognized and thanked. And your book gives so many practical ways to do that. So really liked that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I just love all these quotes and examples you're pulling out. Like you've totally done your homework and I love it. I think, in some ways, it's just not rocket science, right? Like, of course people want to feel thanked. Of course people want to feel like they're making an impact on the world. And in some ways we forget that. And we're so like the hamster in the wheel of like, what else can we give? What other tchotchke can we give? What other donor benefit can we give? And I'm not saying there's not a place for the wine receptions and that's community building and there's a place for that, but it's this idea of, if we remind people about the cause, about the impact, like that's kind of the holy grail, because then we're not just trading in transactional value at that point. Now we're talking about something way deeper. And that is really the sweet spot of like why people give and why they continue to give.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and one other thing I just want to touch on too is your quote or your statistic that you mentioned. Nationwide, 90% of first-time orchestra attendees never return. And that just hit me between the eyes. Because as you mentioned, it's not a problem with the art. When you talk to these people who are filling out these surveys, you get them talking about the art and they're just in awe and they're raving about the art that they experience. It's not the product, it's the packaging. And you kind of go into how we're welcoming these people as first-time guests into our home, basically, and they're not necessarily feeling comfortable. A lot of people are not coming into arts experiences with the same knowledge base that they did 50 years ago, and we need to recognize that. And you give some really practical, easy solutions to just make it more approachable. Even if every single program is an hour and a half, just list that time so that people can plan accordingly. But touch on some of that a little bit for people.
Yeah. So this is chapter 1, and it's all about the strategy's user experience research. And I know 10 years ago, I didn't even know it was called user experience research. I started doing it, but I didn't know that was what it was called. And just the simplest definition is just going to your users or your customers, your patrons, your audience, your students, whoever your customer is, and asking them about their experience. And the key in many ways is to ask people how they feel, because how somebody feels is their truth. And so what we learned in doing this is that newcomers feel intimidated. They feel even anxiety over what to wear, which that was just really, you talk about like hitting it in the head between the eyes. That's what I felt like. I was like, you have so much anxiety over what to wear. Like, it's okay. Especially in California, it's cool. Like, no problem. They're like, no. And it wasn't that they wanted to dress down. Like sometimes we think like the quote unquote younger audiences want to be casual. It wasn't that. They said, I want to fit in. And so going back to like talking about deeper needs of people, like fitting in, that's a real deep need that all of us have. And so it started becoming so clear that these very troublesome emotions, they feel unwelcome, they feel intimidated, they feel like they don't belong, they feel anxiety, their words. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is also about the experience I'm trying to provide before the experience, quote unquote, even begins, except for them, it has begun, right? And so this just was very eye-opening for me. And so it became clear that these emotions are why so many people come once and never come again. And just to put a finer point on this, when we get to the part of the discussion where we're talking about the art itself, and this is how I know the product is so strong, aside from the stats and how difficult it is to win jobs and things, because they tell us, and this has been replicated multiple times now in the work I've done, we talk about the product and how does that make you feel? The emotion is awe. I felt awe. And I'm like, okay, the music is not the problem. The product is not the problem. The art is not the problem. It's all these other things tangential to the experience that are causing deeply negative emotions. And I thought, but wait, these things are fixable. These are fixable things.
Sure. Yeah, and your surveys reveal that first timers really deeply want to be educated attendees. They want to be informed. And so it's really easy to make small changes that will help them set their expectations. They know how early they should show up, what they should wear, when they should clap, how long the event lasts, so they know how long to get childcare, or if they should plan dinner before or after, all of those things. They're pretty easy to make. And I'll link in the show notes. Holly Mulcahy is a musician who's done a lot in this field. And so listeners can definitely learn more about this specific issue by following some of her work too. But above all else, you say in your book, make it easy. Just make it easy for people to feel comfortable. It's not hard to do. And just those small changes can make bring huge dividends for our organizations.
Yeah. And this idea of make it easy, this comes from research out of Yale. The professor there at the School of Management is Zoe Chance. And so I just want to say, it's not just me saying make it easy. Her research shows that this blew me away, more than any other factor, and I'll name some of them in just a moment, but more than any other factor, ease is the number one predictor of if people will take action, buy a product, buy a service. And so she says it is more than price. It's more than loyalty programs. It's more than surprise and delight. It's more than the actual experience itself. I mean, you name it. The number one factor is of if people will make a transaction. In this case, we're talking about ticket sales. We want people to come see our performances and we want them to come back again. The number one factor is make it easy. The easier it is to do something, the more people will do it, she says, period.
Well, and that's all the more reason too to do the subscriptions the way you were talking about earlier in our conversation. If people have to renew all the time, it makes it less convenient for them to do so. They have to expend more effort to make that happen. Whereas just make it as convenient as possible for them to attend and continue to be subscribers.
Yeah. Can I just share a story on this? This was because This is not in the book. This is a orchestra I was working with recently. They're in my Run It Like a Business Academy. And we were talking about this exact series of conversations and topics. And they were working on their subscription renewals. This was last year. And they said, okay, we're so nervous. What are the long timers going to think? This is the common question I get. What about our quote unquote core audience? And they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. They said, we really believe that this quote unquote should work. So we're going to try some of this. And they said, in their subscription renewal form, they just put a box at the top. First of all, they merged in all the account information, which we have. We have their name, we have their address. And they used to ask people to refill all that out. So they're like, no, we're going to make it easy. Yeah, totally. Right. And so they're like, we're going to make it easy. They merge in everything. They merge in their seat location. They merge, all the stuff that they already had on file. And they put a box at the top and they said, check this box if you want everything to stay the same. If you want changes, there's space below. Mm-hmm. You can request a different seat or whatever. They got, I forget the exact number, but it was the vast majority of their longtime subscribers were like, oh, thank goodness. All I got to do is check a box and send you my check or write in my credit card, and talk about emotions. The emotion was relief. Their long timers were relieved. You made this so easy for me. Oh my gosh, check a box. Here you go. I'm done. See you next season. I'm in. And awesome. And talk about relief for the organization too. They're like, oh, sure. This didn't rub anybody the wrong way. This made it easy. And their subscription renewal rates were super high. And they were like, well, we're never going back. Yeah.
Wow, love that. Well, I could talk to you all day about your book. I do want to save time for you to tell us about your podcast and all of the resources that you offer. Before we jump into that, is there anything else that you absolutely want to make sure you squeeze in about the book other than I'll just tell listeners, like, just get it. Just get it and read it. It's fantastic. And give so many very practical hands-on solutions that you can implement right away. But anything else about the book that you want to squeeze in before we talk about some of those other topics?
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you very much. You're so generous. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, tell us about your podcast, The Offstage Mic.
Yeah. So from one podcaster to another, I think for me, it's just so important to be able to provide more value to our field, to be able to expound on some of these topics that are in the book and talk about other topics that weren't maybe quite right for the, 250 pages or whatever the book is, but other things that we confront and deal with on a daily basis. So it's called The Offstage Mic. It's really for anybody who wants to think about the business surrounding the art, the arts management of it all. And so we're on season 3 right now. And yeah, anybody who wants more where this came from, Offstage Mic.
Okay. We'll have a link in the show notes, but just tell us verbally what your website is.
AubreyBergauer.com. And for the podcast, it's just AubreyBergauer.com/podcast.
Great. Fabulous. You on that website, you offer a ton of resources. We haven't really talked much about your services, but you provide consulting services. You mentioned an academy of some sort. There's also free articles, of course, your free podcast and other content. You have a short quiz that will filter results and give somebody a customized list of articles and episodes that are tailored to that individual and what their role is. So tell us about some of these resources available on your website.
Yeah. So let's see. We'll start with the quiz because I think that's if anybody who's just learning about me and you're like, how do I get more of what this woman is talking about? I would say just go to my website. It's a pop-up, so you'll get hit with it. But the quiz is, but it's designed that way because it's been so popular. So I've been creating content now for 10 years, as Mindy, as you just said. It's blogs, it's the podcast, it's all kinds of stuff. And so I was getting a lot of requests of like, where do I begin, basically? And so that's what the quiz was about. It's like 5 questions. It takes 60 seconds and you just, fill out the quiz and then you get sent to your curated playlist of podcast episodes, reading list of blog articles that are really tailored for you and what your role is, where you are in your career, all that kind of stuff. So that's the quiz. And like I said, it's been super popular because people are like, yeah, thank you. I just need to
make it easy
seconds and make it easy. Yes. Definitely trying to practice what I preach here. So that's that. And then the academy I'll just share is for anybody who does still want more. I have all of the strategies in my book in a training course, and that's the Run It Like a Business Academy. So for anybody who's like, yep, I get it. I need to know how. The book has a bit of that, but for anybody who's like, I want more, I want worksheets, I want the checklists, I want, just hand it to me, Aubrey. That's the Run It Like a Business Academy. And it's an online course. You can go at your own pace, but there's also live office hours with me every other week. So participants get that real-time support. And that right now is where the majority of my client work has moved, to be honest, because it's like the same, like 90% the same stuff I was saying when people would bring me in, but because it's online and digital, fraction of the cost to the user, to the consumer, to the customer. So Run It Like a Business Academy for anybody who is like, yeah, I really want more of a training on these topics. That's the route for you for sure.
Love it. Well, I'm just so thrilled that you're doing this work. Love the book. Love all of the offerings that you have. I mean, full spectrum from free articles and podcasts to paid academies and consulting one-on-ones with you. So love all those different options. As you know, Aubrey, I ask all my guests to close out our conversation with a musical ending, a coda, by sharing a song or story about a moment that music enhanced your life. Do you have a song or a story that you can share with us today in closing?
Yeah, I remember when I was really little, I think it has to be like 3 years old or 4 years old. And my dad, I'm a child of the 80s. So my dad was super into his record player still. This is like right before CDs probably came out, to the forefront. But so it was like his record collection was everywhere. And I just remember being young and he would just bounce between genres all the time. And so it was like, Bruce Springsteen on 1 minute. Then I have this vivid memory of the Stravinsky's Firebird, and like both of those songs, I'm just dancing around the living room, 3-year-old Aubrey, just like dancing around. And so I didn't know these were different genres either, of course. And it was just this effortless, like I said, like, oh, there's this song and now there's this other song, and so that's what I remember is just, dad and the record player and just dancing around, whether it's Stravinsky or the Boss or Michael Jackson or, again, child of the 80s here, right? So there you go. There's my coda.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much to Aubrey for joining us today and for sharing her expertise in her book and in the many resources available on her website. I'm so excited about how she is sharing these cross-disciplinary strategies to the nonprofit sector and hope you find this content inspiring, helpful, and encouraging. You'll find all the links from today's conversation in this episode's show notes, as well as a transcript of the episode and links to all episodes in the business category. You may already know that all Enhanced Life with Music episodes can be found listed by category, so you can quickly find topics most related to your interests. In addition to business, the other 3 categories are science and health, sports and entertainment, and education and community. They can be found by going to the archives page of my website. Just use the menu or go to mpetersonmusic.com/podcast/archives. If you know of someone who would enjoy this episode, perhaps a nonprofit you would love to see succeed, please share it with them. You can always connect with me on email, mindy@mpetersonmusic.com, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, may your life be enhanced with music.